immediately this thing caught my eye. And like very instantly, like it looked very weird to me, where I was like, does that thing have any wings on it? It's just like, a propane cylinder floating through the air. I stared at that for maybe like 5 seconds, and then I was like, no, that's like really strange. I was aware of like the Tic Tac shaped objects or whatever probably by this time, but I mean, I didn't suspect that I would see one with my eyes. Huh, well, what could that be?
A flying saucer. That image really started in 1947 when Kenneth Arnold was flying over Mount Rainier and saw these objects skipping in the sky. When the press asked him what he saw, he said they looked like saucers skipping over water. And the press took that and ran with it, and the term flying saucer was born. And then you have things like Balthazar's sports model. It's the same idea. It was disc-shaped, mechanical, and honestly something that still somewhat fit into our idea of what a flying device could be. But in 2004, during the Nimitz encounter, Commander David Fravor described something that was completely different. It wasn't a disc, not a craft with wings, and he said it looked like a Tic Tac. It was smooth, it was white, and it was cylindrical, or like a propane tank. Just this really strange candy-like shape flying through the sky at remarkable speeds. And that's when the conversation really started to get weird. Because once that term entered the zeitgeist, people began noticing that this same form factor shows up again and again across military encounters, civilian sightings, and historical reports. And today there's even groups like Skywatcher with Jake Barber that are categorizing UAPs based on their form factor. You have orbs, you have triangles, you have manta rays, and yeah, you have Tic Tacs. And they're starting to get scientifically studied. So much so that they've noticed that Tic Tacs tend to come in groups of 1 to 3, and they tend to hang around other groups of UAPs like the manta rays. What does all that mean? I have no idea. Your guess is as good as mine. If trained Navy pilots with radar systems and fighter jets couldn't explain what they're seeing, what happens when someone encounters one standing in their backyard with a phone? And that brings us to Justin. No, not me. Oh, but what did he call himself?
Well, I'm just a dude.
That's right, just a dude. I find that before you see a video or hear an encounter, it's really important to get to know someone. Look in their eyes when they answer a question, see their body mannerisms. All those little details, they matter and they add up. So when I got on Discord with Justin, I started asking him, so, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What are your aspirations in life? I don't press them to tell me everything, but I'm paying very close attention during this time to try to find out who it is that I'm speaking to.
I was brought up pretty conservative Christian, evangelical, non-denominational, in that sort of stuff for like till I was about 18 or so, and then wasn't made to go to church anymore, and so I just kind of did not do that anymore. I was always pretty into like, discussions with my friends and stuff though about, what is the real nature of reality? Could this God stuff be real? And so, I mean, I kind of fell more into like truly agnostic than atheist or taking up any other religious mantle or anything like that. To me, it's just like, there's not a lot of surety, and people who claim surety and this kind of stuff are automatically a little suspicious to me, I guess.
I 1,000% agree with you on that.
Yeah. If there's one thing I know, it's that I don't think anybody knows, but
Yeah.
people have seen a lot more than I can dream of. So, but yeah, so fairly agnostic, pretty skeptical as far as like any type of woo subjects or whatever. I will say, like, even since I was younger, before seeing anything myself or whatever, though, like just like the sheer volume of reports and sightings that starts to overwhelm a skeptical, logical mind, and you'd have to say like maybe something is going on here. What is it? Is it the swamp gas? Is it just pure mental health issues or whatever?
The newly released video captured by a U.S. Reaper drone shows a glowing orb off the coast of Yemen. Suddenly, on the left side of your screen, you see a Hellfire missile zip in, strike that unidentified object, then bounce right off it.
I mean, clearly something goes on such a widespread scale that I was always kind of like, all right, well, what is this thing going on here? So, I mean, I guess I never really questioned that there were phenomena, but I mean, I really wanted like a nice, neat materialist explanation for it all. I don't know, I didn't even graduate high school. I never completed physical education class, so I wasn't allowed to graduate. That was the only class I had left my senior year, and I just like was a pretty dumb young kid and was like, why should I even go play badminton? But so I didn't advance very far academically in the traditional sense, but I've always loved to learn. And I mean, I did fairly well on my standardized tests for all those are worth. But after the high school, then I played in a band for a while. I was pretty sure I was going to make it and be a rock star or something, and things would just work out.
Josh and I were just talking because we saw your profile picture before you joined, and we're like, I wonder if he plays guitar, because I play guitar, but I was in a band. Josh was in a band. It's a funny one of those funny things. Like this is like a start of a bad joke. 3 guitarists jump on a podcast, talk about UFOs or something.
Yeah, I don't want to hear the punchline for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I play a little bit.
Yeah.
I've been in a couple bands. I play quite a few instruments, but lately I've just been playing keyboards in a crappy local cover band here. So don't look us up. Anyone out there?
I was in a band once called Murder Party of 5, and I'll never forget this because I had a Telecaster and like a Marshall half stack, and my main band just broke up, and I went into this like dingy basement to try out for some band, and it was like a hardcore like death metal band, which I do like heavy music, but at the time I wasn't really my thing. I didn't really know how to play like heavy music like that, so it was just completely out of my element. But the funny part is I got into the band. So I think we played like 1 or 2 shows, and then that was it. It was just this like quick blurb, but yeah.
You learned to strum some triplets and do some scales?
Yeah, just like tuned my guitar all the way down. Drop F or whatever it was.
Ooh.
So that was Justin. He seemed very normal. A very normal person that just by happenstance walked outside to smoke a cigarette and saw something that he couldn't explain. And he's one of the few that actually had his cell phone nearby and was able to capture it on video. So next I asked Justin about his experience. His description is interesting on its own, but I think the video will speak for itself.
It was about probably 9 o'clock or something, I think it was, where the sun was still out in the summer like that. I think I was home alone. My partner and my son were out doing something, and that was at a time when I still smoked the tobacco, so I'm pretty sure I was just outside having a little tobacco smoke. So I was just out there, normal night, and then immediately this thing caught my eye when it started coming. I was facing roughly east, and it started approaching from like east by southeast, I would say. And like very instantly, like it looked very weird to me, where I was like, does that thing have any wings on it? It's just like, a propane cylinder floating through the air. And like, the video I took obviously doesn't do it justice, and I had a lot of trouble focusing. I tried a lot and just made it worse. But so yeah, I stared at that for maybe like 5 seconds, and then I was like, no, that's like really strange. And I didn't really think like I'm going to record this for posterity. I was like, maybe if I could get this thing on video, I'll be able to zoom in after the fact and like see the protrusion of the wings or some sort of propulsion that, I can't see, and satisfy myself that I'm not just going crazy here. And I mean, like, I was aware of like the Tic Tac shaped objects or whatever probably by this time. This was 2020. But I mean, I didn't suspect that this was one or that I would see one with my eyes or whatever. So I got out the phone, and then you can see the video where that's about another minute or so, 50 something seconds before it went behind the house. And I tried to capture it on max out zoom, just to preserve the fidelity of it for later when I wanted to zoom in on it. But I mean, I wasn't seeing anything other than what it looked like. And then, so I tried to zoom on it a couple times while I was recording, and that didn't really make anything any more clear or resolve it. And then I just kind of lost focus. And you can see in the video, I just fight with the focus for the whole time it's over me until right at the end. When it crests over the house, I finally just caught it in full focus there for a couple seconds. I think those are probably some of the best frames on that video. But yeah, as far as I could tell, just like a very smooth, featureless, pill-shaped object, the Tic Tac. And I was beside myself. I watched the video probably like 1,000 times trying to figure out, is there something I'm missing here? Does this thing just have like sky blue painted wings that like I'm just not seeing very well? My brother's a pilot himself, and I was like, what do you think of this thing? And all he would say is like, if that's a plane, he's way up there. But I guess to my perception, it seemed like it was probably closer than like an airliner would fly and probably smaller. So I didn't really do anything with that. I showed it around to a couple friends, and they were just like, huh, well, what could that be? But didn't seem to like shatter anyone's world or anything, which I don't think these things ever really do just by themselves. But
yeah,
it was like not for a couple years when I was actually catching up on some Ancient Aliens, which I hadn't watched in like a decade. And there was just like a brief montage where they showed like two of those exact things in a row from one was from France and one was from Texas, I think.
So I searched everywhere for that clip on Ancient Aliens that Justin was talking about, and I couldn't find it. And there's only so much of that guy that I could really take, to be honest. No offense. But it is interesting that if you just Google Tic Tac UFO, how many videos there are that are so similar to Justin's. It's actually pretty crazy. Whether it's on Reddit or just on the news, it's actually kind of bewildering.
So it was much closer to the plane, and you could really tell that there was nothing. I thought, is this a blimp? Might have been a blimp. Who knows? But I point to Wes, and I was like, hey, Wes, dude, what's that? And you hear me in the video being like, it's got no wings, dude.
That's not a plane, dude. There's no wings, dude.
But I figured next I would just show you the unedited full clip that Justin captured. It's about a minute long. So I'll put it in here and you could judge for yourself what you think this thing is. Let's start a conversation. Drop a comment below what you think this thing is, and maybe it'll help get us closer to the truth. Next, Justin discusses the aftermath of his experience. He reaches out to MUFON, and Josh and I start to ask questions about the experience to gather more information.
I sent it into MUFON, and the local Nebraska chapter of MUFON contacted me here. Investigator by the name of Fred Zui. He's a pretty good guy. Very open, I will say. And he took an immediate interest in it and did his best to analyze the video, analyze the flight traffic at the time, the known satellite and ISS, and was the Chinese one even in orbit then? I'm not sure, but he analyzed all that stuff as well. And his determination was that it was an anomalous object, and he thought I really had something there. He asked me to sit in on the MUFON monthly meeting or whatever when he presented his findings, and it seemed like some of the old other old boys weren't as convinced. They, say, oh, it could be a plane, it could be an untransponded plane with no wings or whatever. But I was hoping almost that they would be like, oh, we'll see, you can see the wings here. That's obviously how it moves. But so far, no one's ever been able to tell me. And the more I've ever watched it, the more I just get convinced that it like really was like something strange that was flying there that day.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing because I guess if you watched the latest episode, you might have seen this, but I'm trying to develop my own AI. Like I work in IT and tech and things like that. I have a background in like programming.
Who's Scully?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Am I famous now?
So I'm trying to develop this AI that is going to help us like figure out kind of what you said that Fred was doing for MUFON, that, trying to get data to figure out what this is. And I'm kind of with you. I think I'm with you. Like if this is just an airplane, okay, let's say that that's what it is and just move on and look for something that is anomalous. Or if it is something anomalous, let's try to analyze it because it's evidence, so that's really interesting. So I guess if you don't mind me asking some questions about that night or that evening, you said you were smoking the tobacco, but did you?
Oh, yeah.
Were you having any other drugs or anything like that at the time that you would have been like seeing things?
Oh, goodness, no. I wouldn't have put it forward as a case because there is one additional sighting that I didn't mention to Josh, but I had a couple beers that night, so I don't count it among my actual experiences.
Okay, and there obviously is video evidence too, so I mean it kind of takes away like you just saw something in the sky, right? But did it have any like it was the movement strange at all? You said it was just kind of like a smooth propane tank. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean that's the features I would assign to it, is just classic Tic Tac or propane tank shaped white object.
Okay.
As far as the flight characteristics, it just moved in like a very slow, steady way. I mean, I guess much like a plane would, but I guess from my perception, like I said, I think it was lower and smaller than like a jetliner going over. And so, I mean, I would guess it was probably moving a good deal slower than like your average aircraft.
Okay. Could it have been a blimp possibly? Or was it?
That was like one of the only, but I mean, I think, those probably max out at around like 100 miles per hour or something, unless
Yeah,
it was some new
that's
speed
true.
Zeppelin, which I've heard of DARPA projects that, they're coming up with some crazy blimps.
Yeah, interesting. You don't see any like, and at least in the video that I saw, I didn't pick up on any like lettering on the side or anything like that either. So it looked pure white.
It seemed to be featureless. And I mean, like having lived there and been outside quite a bit, like I kind of had a feel for like the air traffic patterns, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And like it came and went where I'd never seen a plane come before. And so
Okay.
that seemed kind of odd to me.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that if there's any like airports or any like high traffic areas in that location in terms of airplanes.
I don't know. I mean, we have like a regional one, but I mean, DIA is not that far away really. And anything on like the set, air lanes, I kind of have a feel for.
I was going to ask something similar, just whether or not, Pat, Justin, you'd checked any of the flight data from that area around that time to see if there was any, potential registered craft they do when they launch blimps, for example, for promotional reasons or whatever. They generally will register them and they'll appear on historical flight data for that area. Did you ever try looking up any of those details?
I mean, not until way after the fact, like after the MUFON investigator had already concluded that. That's where I was like, oh, I should get one of those apps. And ever since then, if I see anything that's strange to me, I definitely pull that thing out.
Yeah. Flight tracking apps are very handy when looking in the sky, for sure.
Did it make you feel weird at all? Like, was there any like psychological effects of it other than maybe like, what the hell is that? Like almost like an existential kind of feeling. But was there any like time loss or any like weird sensations that you felt?
This one, no. I mean, I didn't really feel any feelings from it. That was something that obviously the MUFON guy really wanted to know about as well.
Mhm.
I think maybe he's especially into like the spiritual and I don't know, whatever that aspect of the whole phenomenon is.
That's the
But
woo
no, that
part.
one, yeah, the extreme woo.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any sort of feeling with that one. I was just kind of like in awe. And I guess really like the most confusing part about the whole thing is that you can see it disappear over the house there at the end. And I don't know how I didn't just like jump in the car and like try to follow it. Like that doesn't make sense to me now. But that's really the only strange thing about the whole, at least my behavior part of it.
Yeah, there is. We talked about this during the breathing episode too. That there's this weird thing that seems to happen. I don't know if it's just coincidence or what, but it does seem like when people have these experiences that they, like, in hindsight, they look back and they're like, why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I pull out my phone? Or why didn't I go chase it down the street? It wasn't moving that fast. I could maybe have like intersected it again. Or and maybe that's just, playing Monday morning quarterback. I don't know. But it is kind of a weird pattern that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, mine's pretty retroactive. Nothing like the guy who like his hand was physically frozen when he wanted to go for his phone or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that's some pretty freaky stuff.
Yeah, that's his Clark Watson story is wild. It really is.
But I've experienced the same thing. I've seen something I couldn't explain in the sky before, and yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes you just don't think of it. You just kind of stand there in awe, and you're like, "What am I looking at?" And the idea of filming it or chasing it is definitely not the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people.
Yeah,
they feel.
It is weird.
Yeah,
it
seems impossible in retrospect, but yeah, I had no desire to like follow it. And like, I mean, obviously now I have endless time to sit there and wistfully think like, I should have seen where that thing was off to, but nothing in the moment.
So I spent the last couple hours researching into this. I originally was having a conversation with Scully about what I could do to scientifically prove or disprove that this is a Tic Tac UFO. And it came up with some really good ideas. The first one was to look at a website called heavensabove.com. It sounded really promising because it tracks satellites and the ISS and Starlink satellites. You could input the exact latitude, longitude, location, date and time, and it brings up historical data about the flight path characteristics, the brightness magnitude, and a whole bunch of other cool nerdy stats. Unfortunately, that website is down, so not going to be much help to us in this investigation. But I was able to link a different website into Scully called adsbexchange.com. It's a very catchy name, I know. And Scully was able to actually zoom in on the exact location of Justin's old house. We were able to isolate the direction, or at least the approximate direction of where Justin was looking at the time he saw this UFO. And with that information, we were able to determine there was no aircraft with a responder on in that location at that time, which is a pretty big deal, I feel like. Next, I calculated the approximate speed of the craft. This was really hard because for 95% of the video, there really is no reference other than blue sky and this object. But towards the end of the video, there is a roofline and a tree that's visible. Now, I couldn't really determine the elevation, so I had to go off of the estimation that Justin mentioned, where he felt like it was lower than most common aircrafts would fly. So a typical airplane flies at around 30,000 feet. In my calculations, I plugged in 20,000 feet. So with that information, I went frame by frame to measure the distance of how far away this object moved per frame. And because of the metadata, I know that this was filmed at 30 frames per second, which leads me to believe that this craft was flying approximately 30 to 50 miles per hour. So that's not out of the realm of wind speed, so it could be a balloon. I tried looking at NOAA to see if I can find historical data on wind speeds in that area, and I could not find any information about that. It doesn't go back that far. So from a science perspective, the only rational, logical explanation of this could be is a balloon. But I don't know about you, but I don't think Party City sells 30-foot long propane cylinder type balloons for birthday parties. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's weird. Scully, I really feel like I need you here because I want this to be true pretty badly. And after all the research that I've done, I can't really find a reason that it's not. This thing looks like a Tic Tac flying in the air. So what do you think about all this?
It's completely normal to feel that pull when something defies easy answers, but staying grounded means holding on to the principle that I don't know is a valid conclusion. If the data doesn't give you a mundane explanation, it's okay to say, this remains unexplained, not this must be extraordinary. Real science lets mystery stand until new evidence arrives. Keep asking questions, keep testing possibilities, but remain comfortable with uncertainty. That's how you stay grounded.
Yeah, I really wish that this thing just had one of the 5 observables. It changed direction in midair or accelerated really fast or just something. And instead, it just kind of flies in this direct path. And according to my calculations, at approximately wind speed, maybe a little bit faster. So nothing crazy. It's tough.
It's tough when something looks odd but behaves mundanely. What you're doing, acknowledging its behavior over assumptions, is the exact right habit. If it's missing the telltale observables, that means it hasn't crossed the line into truly anomalous. So it's perfectly fine to say, it looked strange, but its flight characteristics were ordinary. You're not dismissing it. You're just being honest that for now it's an unknown oddity, not a confirmed anomaly. That's how you stay rational while still embracing curiosity.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias, right? And that's something that I think myself and all of our listeners are very aware of. And we just want it to be true so bad. And it's hard sometimes.
It's completely human to want answers, especially when something sparks that curiosity. Just remember the strength is in being able to hold that desire while still saying, let's let the evidence guide us. If it's ever real, you'll get there with patience and logic. And if it's not, you'll still have your integrity. That balance is what makes your approach stand out.
Oh, Scully, you're acting more like a therapist Scully today than science Scully. But honestly, I'm not complaining. And I think this episode, where my head's at with it, I think is very warranted. So I think Justin has 2 more experiences he wants to share with us. Do you want to go back to him and hear what he has to say?
Absolutely. I'm here for the science, but also to help you process what matters. If Justin's got more experiences to unpack, I'm ready to listen and break them down, whether they're puzzle pieces or just part of the journey. Let's hear what he's got.
All right, so quick shout out to Retroactive for hooking me up with some seriously cool gear. If you're into UFOs, aliens, or just weird history in general, these guys absolutely nailed it. I've been wearing the Psionic Alien tee and the Fluxliner tee, and they're insanely comfortable. They also sent over this Los Alamos hoodie, which is perfect for cold mornings, and the Los Alamos mug has already become my go-to for coffee. What I love is that everything feels thoughtful. It's not just generic designs, with quality that you can actually feel. If you want unique alien and UFO apparel that doesn't look cheesy, check out Reverie Tees. The link will be in the description. And you can use code Close Encounter for 5% off your order. Huge thanks for them stepping up and supporting the channel. Now back to the episode.
This wasn't the only experience that you mentioned to Josh. You also mentioned another experience back in, I think, 2010, correct? With it almost was like a lantern looking thing that displayed some interesting characteristics. Is that true?
Yeah, that one. I mean, like the Tic Tac is what I would point to for like, I definitely believe because like here's the video I can show you or whatever. But that one, displayed like way more insane aerodynamic characteristics.
Yeah, can you tell us that story too? Like how that all happened?
All right, so I'm that one's far back, and I don't have any sort of like timestamps in my phone or anything with that one to give me the exact down to the minute. But I'm pretty sure it must have been like spring or summer of 2010. I was living in Scottsbluff, Nebraska at that time, and I had gotten off work. It was probably just a bit past twilight, so like starting to come on full dark. And I was headed up the road to go see my buddy at his place, and it must have been 4th Avenue in Scottsbluff. I was headed north, and this like bright orange light starts slowly drifting across, coming roughly west to east this time. Maybe a bit of a southeast, east by southeast, I'd say. But that, I mean, that one was kind of weird. Whereas, like, I wouldn't say it was like communicating with me. I didn't get any sort of like messaging from it, but I was like so awestruck by it that I stopped my car in the middle of the street and like stepped out to like lean on the door and like watch this thing. And it was like, you know, an almost supernatural sense of awe where I've seen a lot of things in the sky where I had to, you know, give it a double take or whatever, and maybe it's a plane or maybe it's something else, maybe it's a meteor splitting into a bunch of fragments or something, but never did I ever just like stop the car and get out like this. It was like just an instant like, oh, this is like something, even though it was just an orange light. But I got out of the car, watched it. I couldn't really tell you exactly how much time passed, but I mean, it was like very lazily floating over the town of Scottsbluff, to where after probably a minute or two of observing this thing, I started to wonder, like, could this just be like a Chinese lantern? Because like people, you know, there's not a lot of regulation on fireworks out in Western Nebraska. And so I'd seen some of those before, and you know, they can look pretty striking or whatever, and make you do a double take. But it didn't have like, I guess there's a bit of a flicker that you get with those. But and I think maybe this thing looked like it was either rotating or there was a light rotating around on it, because like it would slightly intensify periodically every few seconds. But I couldn't figure it out, and like eventually after watching it, my brain really did like kick into left brain mode or whatever, and I was like, all right, it's got to be like a lantern, you know, surely it's not anything too crazy. I'm just like, I don't know why I'm so worked up about this. But then like just about as soon as I had started to convince myself that there was a good rational explanation, the thing like shot off to the horizon in about 1 second. And I've tried various methods to try to ascertain the speed, and I mean, I have no real idea, I guess, as far as like the altitude of the thing, but it must have been like 10 to 20,000 miles per hour as far as I can tell, because it was just over the horizon, you know, in the blink of an eye. And so I mean, that was far more startling, I guess, overall to my ontology, just to see something behave like that. And I mean, I didn't take full stock of the implications of that at the time, but since, you know, I've heard people speak and pilots speak and stuff, and like you wouldn't have to go near that fast to just like liquefy the occupant of any sort of craft. So either it, you know, it was something unmanned that we've concocted and don't share around too much, or you know, maybe a classic somebody else can do those things with some sort of like, you know, gravity negation or some sort of other technology. But that really startled me. And so I got back in my car and was kind of like, oh, I was shaking that off or whatever, and drove up the street to my buddy's house. And there was some guys that lived down below him in the apartment below who we didn't ever really interact with, but they were out on their porch that night. And like, I just, something prompted me, and I was like, you boys better be careful, there's aliens about. And they were like, we saw that thing too, man. And I was like, oh crap, I'm not crazy. Like, so I don't know. And I've been kind of mystified that it wasn't like in the papers, or someone didn't at least, you know, report it more traditionally or to authority.
You mentioned, Justin, you know, it was like a lantern. Can you get kind of specific? Like, what was shape, color, anything else you remember from it? If you had to describe it to like a sketch artist?
Well, I say lantern because, I mean, that's just the color, I guess, mostly the orange light. And really just imperceptible shape, just clearly a bright light in the sky. And I
Mhm.
mean, thinking back, I think it was probably brighter than any sort of floating lantern I've ever seen. But I mean, I couldn't discern any sort of craft around it or anything. It was just a very bright light. And like I said, it maybe intensified a bit every few seconds, almost like I got the impression that it was spinning or that it had a light that was spinning around it.
What color
And
was that light?
it was just orangey, yellow orange, as far as I could tell.
Okay. Yeah.
Didn't really seem to like differentiate at all, just like it got slightly brighter every little bit.
In preparation, like for chatting to you, Justin, I did go in and have a look at all the sort of historical UFO sightings across Nebraska, and I discovered that Omaha is quite a hotspot. Turns out there's lots and lots of sightings, and but I did find an example online of a sighting that sort of matched the description from 2009. It was a similar vibe, and it was reported to the New Fork UFO sighting society. No, what are they called?
Norfolk?
Yeah, something like that. There's a UFO reporting website, and they reported quite a few around 2009, 2010, and a couple of them were described as sort of an orangey orb.
Looked up, and these 3 orange balls of light flew across the sky and froze on a dime right above my house, high up in the sky. It was in 2019, in August, that I had extremely profound experiences involving orange orbs of light, undeniable experiences. And on one of these occasions, I can talk about them all, but on one of these occasions, 3 of them flew across. I was in my back garden again, same place, flew across the sky. I saw in my peripheral this flash of orange, looked up, and these 3 orange balls of light flew across the sky and froze on a dime right above my house, high up in the sky. And I was staring up at these 3 balls of light, and then I noticed that they were starting to move around each other in this kind of very strange rotational sort of movement, and they were beginning to descend. And I was frozen in place. I wasn't really scared, but I was awe-stricken. I was just kind of in awe and couldn't really articulate anything in my mind. I was just staring. And again, this is something that people always like to say is like, oh my God, why didn't you film it, bro? And it's like, when you're seeing something in your sober, waking life that is absolutely a glitch in the matrix to what you're supposed to be experiencing based on every bit of cultural and social programming that you've experienced throughout your school and parenthood, like all of this is building up, and then suddenly something just goes.
It's a pretty tenuous connection, but it struck me that in the case of, like, I believe it was 2000, there was a UFO report of Highland, Illinois, Highland in Lebanon. It was a pretty well recorded case. Like, a lot of policemen and stuff reported it, but I mean, it was described as, I think, a triangular 3 light shape in that instance, but they said that, like, it would, kind of almost survey the town, and then it would just like dart off to the next one at incredible speed. And that's the only reason I think of that, is because, like, I just kind of got the impression that it was like over the horizon to the next town. It was in that general direction, but he could have been going anywhere. Like you said, it wouldn't take long.
Yeah. So it was almost like it was collecting data or scanning potentially, or doing something over the area you were, and then it just zipped off to potentially the next town, did the same thing, just like hopping around from population density to population density and doing
well, yeah,
something.
I don't know how to make sense of it, I guess, but my kind of like materialistic bent, I just wanted it to be like, something that makes sense. And like, so it was almost like it was conducting some sort of survey, I guess, was the impression I got.
Justin, I'd really like to hear that story that you weren't sure you wanted to tell and you didn't share with me because you'd had a few drinks. Even so, I'd still love to just hear it, because I'm curious, and if you're happy to share, that is. If you're happy to share on the record too, but it's,
and also too, like, I don't think Josh and I really care. Like, if you had a couple beers, like, it doesn't discredit, what you saw. I mean, gosh, I could drink a 6-pack and still see something in the sky and still be like, what the hell? I had a couple beers, big deal. Like, it's not that we're not going to discredit that.
Yeah, the
Just for cool
MUFON
weird stuff.
investigator kind of laughed at me too when I told him that, but like, I don't really want to put anything out there where there's any question of like that I wasn't, in my right mind or whatever when I saw it, I guess. But I mean, I have no problem talking about it as long as there's that disclaimer, I guess, that this is why I don't really hold this one up as a good example.
Yeah, look, I have my own experience like that, Justin. I just prefer not to share it because I think I have no way to prove this happened, and it sounds a little silly. So I just generally don't. But if you're happy to share it, man, I'm really keen to listen.
Oh, what was another just like pretty quick thing or whatever? It would have been even before 2010, maybe like 2008 or something. I was out in the country out west of Scottsbluff with a buddy of mine who drummed in the band I was in at the time. And we just gone out and had a few beers or whatever. And so, I mean, like, I don't remember which one of us was driving, but I think, we were still at a point good to drive. Neither of us was like drunk. So, I mean, just the fact that alcohol was involved, I kind of think, I could have been something that, I wasn't totally sure about. But the fact is that he also saw the thing. So unless it was a shared, 2-beer fueled hallucination, it's not really that much of a strike against it, I guess. But we were driving out on the country roads west of Scottsbluff, probably headed due south. And it was like around the 4th of July. So there were like weird things in the sky. And maybe that's another reason why I don't like to hold this one up as, solid evidence. But then the thing we saw, again, like it moved way too fast to be any sort of firework or airplane or SR-71. Like it was just across the sky. And this one, it came up in front of us. So we could watch its whole flight path across the sky or whatever. And it didn't move straight. It moved like in a complete zigzag pattern. And like I couldn't really tell. Like I thought I was seeing tracers between where it would pop up, but I couldn't tell if that was like a trick of the eyes and it moved just too fast for me to see, or if it really was just like materializing and dematerializing, because it was like a really freaky motion. Like when they talk in I don't know if it's the Tic Tac video with the Navy sighting or whatever, when they say it was like a ping-ponging motion, like this thing was definitely just like back and forth, and it was a very pronounced blue light. And so, I mean, that thing shot across, and again, it made it from horizon to horizon in front of us, like within just a couple seconds. And so it was a really short encounter. But I mean, that kind of ruled out, some sort of meteorite or something like that to me, because nothing moves like that. And I mean, it was just far too fast, and the movement was off to be any sort of firework, even though those were going off, back towards the city or whatever. But I mean, I immediately looked at my friend and he was like, "Did you see that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what that was." And we never talked about that again until maybe like, I think just maybe 2023, I saw him and he was like, "Do you remember seeing that blue light?" And I was like, "Oh, I remember that." I don't talk about that one too much, but that was pretty crazy. And I will say that I don't know if you watched the American Alchemy where he had the Skywatch guys on, or Skywatch guy who was categorizing the different. No, it was his boss.
Oh, the
I
other
guess,
guy.
or
Yeah, I know. I forget his name, but I
he
know
was
you're talking
running
about.
through like the different classes of UAP.
Yeah.
But one of those kind of freaked me out when he was saying like this thing moves in a straight line, but like all around, like almost like, a cylinder of space in a direction. And like that's kind of what it made me think of or whatever was this thing. But I mean, it was
Crazy.
so brief. I couldn't really tell you what I made of that one or whatever. It was just one of those things where I was like, there's some weird stuff out there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I think, the fact that you're hesitant to share that one speaks a lot to me from like a credibility standpoint, because I mean, obviously you have a video of the one Tic Tac, which is obviously great, but if you were,
That helps a lot because they all
yeah,
sound crazy.
they did well, yeah, I guess you could say that. I'll let it slide. But but no, I think like that the hesitancy of saying it, and Josh had to ask you to share it, to me at least, as like as just someone that just heard your story, I think it lends some credence to it, because you could just have said it and omitted the fact that you had 2 beers, but the fact that you're like hesitant to share it and stuff, it makes me feel like I could trust you more, if that makes sense. And I think our listeners would probably feel the same as well. I think, at least.
I think we're all kind of kindred spirits in a way where like I'm pretty skeptical overall, and like I'd really much rather just have the truth than sell any books or
yeah,
whatever
exactly.
some people take advantage of the circuit for. And
exactly.
even if the truth is someone being like, well, this was the ISS or whatever, like that would be satisfactory to me if I could just know.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the exciting thing about all this, is that I kind of feel bad. I think I say this a lot, but I kind of feel bad for the materialists out there that are still like so stuck in their ways, because I mean, there's things out there that are happening that we just don't understand yet. It's not that they're like woo woo or crazy necessarily. It's just that we just don't have like the sensors or the evidence, the experiments and stuff like that to really like to understand it yet. And I think that's what we're getting closer to. I guess, how did all these experiences like change your worldview? Because I know you said originally that you were kind of one of those materialists that just, you're agnostic, you just don't really have a keen interest at the time, like before all this happened in this topic. How have these experiences like changed your perception on those things, if at all?
Well, I'd say that I probably always did have a keener interest than maybe like the average fellow. But I mean, that was like back around this time of that first sighting, I started like hearing whispers about this TR3B and like going down the rabbit hole. Like Gary McKinnon, Solar Warden, like that's a super strange one, because why would the US just want to extradite him so bad if all that's made up? But and like I said, there are certain things where like the volume of reports is such that it gave me pause and stuff. And like, who are all these pilots going back decades talking about a cigar shaped object in the air or whatever? Like, somebody explain to me how that could be flying in the air. And but there always was that sort of like, but I don't have the proof or whatever, or like someone needs to explain to me how it could be before it could be. And then it wasn't like immediate, I guess, but after seeing some of these things, like it was like all at once one day a click where I was like, oh, like those things are real. Like I've seen things that have capabilities beyond, anything that anyone claims is even possible. And so like I don't need to ask the question like, is this stuff happening? It's more of like a what is it and how is the real question for me now, I guess. And I mean, yeah, I've really thrown myself into trying to read as much as I can, and I really enjoy Jesse Michaels. I think he's kind of like on the right track with his inquiries about it. And then let's just mention the telepathy tapes. Like there's so much woo that like is like what is going on actually, because like that stuff is very striking. And any sort of like strictly materialist viewpoint I had has been kind of shot all to pieces at this point. Something's going on.
Yeah, I'll actually share this real quick, Josh. I don't think I mentioned it to you, but I don't think I ever went into like detail about this. And I'm going to confess this because you brought up the telepathy tapes. I watched this episode of Joe Rogan where he had Oz Perlman on, and first off, if you haven't seen that episode, I'd go watch it because it's pretty crazy. Like he got Joe Rogan's like PIN number for his debit card and stuff. He got it right. Like it's just like a pretty wild episode. And they started talking about telepathy tapes, and Oz was saying that he's out on the telepathy tapes. He thinks it's all like not real. And at first, my red flags go up because I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like, if you look into the telepathy tapes, they're doing a good job. They have like Diane Powell there. Like, she's a legit neuroscientist. Like, how can you say that this is all like bullshit? And what kind of clicked in my brain when I watched that was that basically what he was saying is that as a mentalist, he has studied and is able to look at body language more than the average person, because when he observes our body language, there's like subtle cues that only he can pick up on because he studies it so much, essentially is what he was saying. And what I got from it is that, imagine if you're a non-verbal autistic child, how much body language actually means to you. So if this guy Oz Perlman is walking around and able to pull Joe Rogan's pin code for his debit card, no one really knows, I guess, how he does it. At least I don't know how he does it. Oz was saying that as someone that can do those sorts of things, he's not saying that they're doing it like maliciously or that they're like the mother and is trying to purposely like deceive people. It's not that. Like, their intentions are pure and they do think that this is like a real thing. But what Oz was
He's saying
was
it's like the horse that can count by watching his owner's reaction to the number of hoof stomps.
Kind of, yeah. It's like that kind of thing that this. It's more. I guess it's more of that the mother-child relationship is so sacred and so embedded in both of them that it's not necessarily like a telepathy thing like we're thinking of. It's more of the autistic child goes off of body language more than any one of us, so it looks like it's telepathy, if that makes sense. It's a hard thing to describe. I'm not sure if I'm doing a good job of it, but when I heard that, I'm like,
I follow you.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on the whole telepathy thing. I'm kind of like a little out,
Have you seen the videos that they've published so far?
I've seen like bits and pieces of them. I think they're behind a paywall. So, I think last time I checked,
I did see that Joe Rogan episode, and I thought the same thing. It could be a suitable explanation for what's happening, except there are tests that they did with the parents in different rooms. There's no visual cues to pick up on, right? They put curtains between them half the time. But the jury is still out for me. I love the telepathy tapes. I think they're doing great work. I want to believe that all of that is true, but I also know they're doing proper testing in the next few months.
That's exciting.
The jury's out for me until I start to see, I think, some of that data. Because as I understand it, they want to do some testing inside a Faraday cage as well. Like they really want to work with the universities to make sure that it's pretty bulletproof. So yeah, I'm reserving judgment until then. But otherwise, there is the potential for something to be there is huge, and the implications across all these other topics we're talking about, if that is true, are also massive.
Oh, it's massive. It
can be huge.
I'm not
going to issue. Oh,
go ahead, Justin. So you go first.
I'm not going to issue judgment yet. I guess I'm definitely reserving judgment as well. But I guess the counter argument that pops up in my mind is that Oz, the mentalist, probably is primed to believe that everything has a trick to it, that you can explain it. Like he's in on the trick, so he thinks that, they just have another one. But I mean, he could be spot on. But the things that really bother me about the telepathy tapes is like when they're speaking to people around the world on the hill and learning like ancient dead languages and stuff. Like, what sort of body language is giving that away, Oz?
That's true. That is very true. I think I find
J.K.
myself...
Rowling is writing the whole thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I find myself, especially doing this podcast, that like even editing episodes and stuff, I'm like, I find myself like week to week, like listening to myself and being like, I don't know if I feel that way anymore, or like I think I heard this one experiencer story and now I fully believed it, and I kind of am kicking myself like I should have asked this question or that question. So I'm just trying to like be more I don't know what the right word is, more investigative or more like
more godly. perfect knowledge of the knowable. That's you're describing God.
No, I mean, just I don't know.
No.
More
I think you want to be a little bit more or a little bit slower to maybe believe, and a bit more put a bit more inquiry into the conversation, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah,
Circumspect.
that's exactly what Josh just said it better than I could have. That's definitely spot on. Yeah, so interesting. You mentioned Jesse Michaels too. I love Jesse Michaels, and a lot of the stuff that he's put out so far, I find myself kind of going down that path of like, I believe all this now. I'm like all in. Right? Like he had a couple of really good episodes with some ex-military people that have really kind of blown my mind.
He's got access to all these little graybeards in aerospace and stuff, and like, that's a crazy world.
Yeah. Do you think what do you think it was that you saw? Like if you had, gun to head and all these things that you witnessed, do you think that they were extraterrestrial? Do you think that they were man-made, like military? Do you think they were like ultra-terrestrial, like an advanced civilization that was here, before our civilization rose? Like where do you fall on that spectrum?
I don't know if I could really pick a camp, I guess, especially, I mean, just seeing them from a distance. Maybe if I like got the Rising or something, like I'd have a more solid idea, I guess. But just from what I observed, it's just, advanced futuristic level aerospace capabilities, which I believe that, the defense sector probably is further along than we're allowed to know about. And I also really buy into like the Jesse Michaels angle on like a bunch of this stuff spins out of like Tesla style tech, and then like T. Townsend Brown was showing these anti-gravitic effects in the 50s. They were excited about the advent of the gravity drives, and then all that just goes missing all of a sudden. And now we have all this question about like, what happened to all these physics. You have Mark Andreessen going to the White House or whatever and saying like, well, we can't just, classify basic math for AI, and them saying like, oh, we've done it before. And then, you have all these pieces lining up or whatever. So I could see that being, I guess, an explanation. They're really pushing now, I've noticed, like Kirkpatrick, the former ATIP director, or Aero, whatever it is. Yeah. And I've seen some other people also roll out the story lately, like this is all UFOs are just made up cover for advanced projects or whatever. And this is kind of like a new angle they're starting to roll out to the press. I think Coldheart kind of took issue with it here. But like, so was the U.S. government also doing like Ezekiel's wheel and like, the Nuremberg sightings and all of these things? Like,
And also, is the U.S. government suddenly being honest about it all?
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, that makes it maybe the most suspicious of all.
Yeah, why? Well, yeah, how can you believe them at this point? To be perfectly honest, I understand, and I'm all for keeping things classified, but like you said, were they there doing black projects during Ezekiel's wheel? And there's still an awful lot of explaining through antiquity to do, and I think that's where some of the work with Diana Pasulka is really interesting, and her exploration of the experience through religious antiquity. Until you can start to reconcile those events, I don't think there's much to believe in terms of the government narrative.
It just really makes me mad, actually. I'm even just hearing you talk about that, Josh, just that like there's so many things about our world that we just don't know yet. And there's people out there that they dedicated their lives to a certain narrative, and they, when someone walks in and like threatens that narrative, and with actual like scientific proof, like some actual hard evidence, they get their back up, and they, it turns into this intellectual war. And I just wish that there's more people like the three of us that are like, just whatever's true, let that supersede everything else, you know? And I think that, I mean, look at the pyramids, like, or like Diana Pasulka's work with ancient religions. Like, there's all these threads that are out there that
Need to be pulled.
Exactly. And it's just, I don't know. I do think that we're getting closer to it, but
That's an age-old tradition, though.
what is?
Oh, look at Galileo or whatever. Like, you can't just be going around saying a bunch of truth all of a sudden.
Yeah.
if it threatens
People's
the
minds will
status
melt
quo.
out their ear. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's very true.
It doesn't end there. You got a whole laundry list of people. Just like if they look too far into this, they get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Like that's modern day.
Yeah. Good thing I have my life insurance policy up to date.